The portfolio exploring the financial inclusion and artificial intelligence is now available. It features contributions from partner schools and an exclusive article from Mr. and Francisco. Limited copies can be found in the registration area. For online copies, please visit the next website. Next. Join the FINEX Arts and Poetry in an organized field of the Washington on March 27th and discover in August the world's greatest challenge. Participation in the tour is on first come, first served basis. The FINEX Academy Senior Finance Leadership Program. This program provides unique chances to learn from those who have been in their shoes and to live on it. To know more about this, please contact FINEX Academy Secretary. Still don't have a copy of last year's ethics book, Volume 2? This is still available in the Rosetta, Shopee, and the FINEX office. It works now.
We would like to thank our year-round sponsors. Platinum sponsor FBTI. Gold sponsor BPI. Our host for the day is the 2022 FINEX President and the current FINEX Academy Chairman. Let us all welcome Mr. Michael Arcatomy H. Gurini. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second FINEX General Membership Meeting titled Maharlika Investment Fund. Everything you need to know. I'm sure all of us are looking forward to the fireside chat between our moderator and our guest of honor. This GMM is presented by the Programs and Meetings Committee, and I would like to thank everyone for attending our FINEX General Membership Meeting. I'm sure all of you would also know that it is a very busy day. There are several business organizations with similar events today, and I'm sure all of you would find this best time spent today. So to formally open the program, may I call on our President, Mr. Augusto Bengzon, to call this meeting to order. Yes, I will.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the second FINEX General Membership Meeting to order.
So thank you, President Totti. Now, may I request everyone to stand and join us in prayer to be followed by the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
Dear God, thank you for allowing us to meet at today's event. May you extend your divine wisdom to our speakers so they may be able to impart their knowledge and expertise. Bless all the participants that they will obtain vital information from this event, that they will go out and share what they have learned. In the spirit of your love and generosity, may this activity glorify your name alone. Amen.
Mga kababayan, lagay po natin ang ating kamay sa ating kalumbig at sabay-sabay po natin gamitin ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Bayang pag-ibig, perlas ng silanganan, hanap ng puso, sa ibig mo'y buhay, upang dilihan, huyan ka ng mag-ibig sa manlulupi, di ka pasisilig. Sa dagat at bundok, sa siwi at sa langit bumukha, may nilagang pula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang islap ng mataw, ako'y natintay na nag-ibig. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magtitibig. Lupa ng araw na umalhati, pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa ating ang ligaya na pagkay ng pati, ang mamatay na dahil sa'yo.
You may now have your seat. And then may I have President Totti back for his president's message and report.
To our guest speaker, Joel Consing, friends from media, guests, fellow directors and officers of FINEX, our beloved members, good afternoon. As Mike had mentioned, we are going head to head with another business group. Third Wednesday of the month is FINEX's. That was the agreement, but for some reason they decided to have their event on this day. But this morning I got a urgent message from Mike Guarin, and he said that we had only reserved for 100 people. And all of a sudden, there was a surge of over 150 people who wanted to attend this afternoon's GMM. So I can only attribute that to the speaker that we're having this morning. I think everybody knows and everybody wants to hear from our friend, Mr. Joel Consing. Since the present administration announced the creation of a sovereign fund. The public, particularly the business sector, has expressed numerous questions and concerns. It was a highly debated topic, and if you remember last year, we held a GMM where high-level business leaders and industry experts presented opposing viewpoints on the Maharlika Investment Fund. With the law now being in effect and the Maharlika Investment Corporation officially constituted, it is critical that we in the business community understand its governance, objectives, and strategy. Today, we are very fortunate, extremely fortunate to have the President and CEO and our fellow FINEX member, Joel Consing, to share with us the direction and priority areas of the Maharlika Investment Corporation following its four investment pillars of tourism infrastructure, agricultural urbanism, energy, and information and communications technology. Thank you, Joel, for taking time out from your very busy schedule to join us this afternoon. Adding on to our other announcements before we have Joel come on board. The past month in FINEX, it has been extremely active and busy. Let me highlight some of them. Last January 15 and 16, your committee chairs presented to the board of directors their plans and programs for the year. As usual, this year will promise to be an extremely busy year for FINEX. Last January 24, your FINEX leadership was inducted into office by Ms. Mariana Zobel de Ayala in a purely face-to-face event at the Manila Polo Club. It was a very well-attended ceremony with close to 200 participants. Last January 31, your board of directors met with the Council of Past Presidents, an annual tradition that allows us to share our programs and listen to the wisdom of our past presidents in order to ensure to our society. On advocacy, FINEX co-signed the position paper on Revenue Memorandum Circular 5-2024. Thank you to our Tax and Legal Committee Chair, John Vergara, Vice Chair, Eric Recalde, and of course, our Liaison Director, Wilson Tan, for taking the lead. On March 2, our Arts and Culture Committee will host a tour of Binondo entitled A Walk-in Tour of Binondo and feast on culinary gems curated by Tourmaster Ivan D. I'm also pleased to announce that BSP Governor Eli Remolona has accepted to speak in front of us at our next GMM. We are advancing the GMM to accommodate Governor Remolona's extremely busy schedule. So instead of the third Wednesday of March, it will be on the first Wednesday of March. This will be on March 6, and it will be held at the Manila Golf Club. He will talk about the BSP's key projects for sustainable and innovative capital markets, financial stability, and inclusive economic growth. This GMM, unlike the usual luncheon, will be held in the late afternoon, starting at 4 p.m. Cocktails will be served so that we may have a very interesting and relaxed networking session after the talk of Governor Remolona. Please look forward to our other announcements for upcoming programs. We have started our campaign for this year's year-round sponsorship. We hope that you and your companies will be one of them. The packages include Partner for 2 million, Platinum 1 million, Diamond 750,000 pesos, Gold 500,000, and Patron 300,000 pesos. As early as now, I would like to express my sincerest gratitude to the following organizations for already this early confirming their support, namely although this was a carryover from 2023. They came in pretty late this year, so thank you, BPI. We will use your sponsorship in this calendar year. We hope that this campaign will allow us to carry out our ambitious programs. As this year, we are also embarking on a membership recruitment campaign to increase our membership base, particularly among publicly listed companies and the top 1,000 corporations. But we will also be reaching out to SMEs as we'd like to broaden our membership base. I appeal to all of you to invite your friends and colleagues to join FINEX this year. We will continue to keep you informed of our planned initiatives. Your committees are hard at work, and they will be launching many programs this year. And we will keep you updated on the progress of our major thrusts for the year. We really hope to have your continued support and, more importantly, your continuing engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, President Totti. At this point, we will induct selected FINEX Institute directors and committee officers. If present, well, both are present. May I ask both of you to go on stage when I call your name? Ms. Gemma Cheng and EJ Kwayansen. May I call President Totti for the formal induction, please?
Now, please raise your right hand. I state your name. Having been appointed as of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, do hereby solemnly swear that I will faithfully discharge, to the best of my ability, my duties and responsibilities in the pursuit of its goals and objectives, that I will protect and uphold its constitution and bylaws, that I will abide by its code of ethics, that I will observe the highest professional, moral, and ethical standards, and that I voluntarily impose this obligation upon myself without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God. Congratulations.
Make sure that the next slide.
Thank you, President Totti. Now for our committee officers. Kindly go to the stage when I call your name. Adrian Abrujena, Chairman, ICT Committee. Jesus Arellano, Co-Chair, Young Finance Officers Committee. Sunny Coloma, Co-Chair, Life Icon Subcommittee. Arthur Chung, Chairman, Sports and Wellness Committee. Nanette De Jesus, Chair, Programs and Meetings Committee. Inigo Garcia, Chair of Public Relations, CFO of the Year Award Committee. Mr. Domingo, finally, Mr. Domingo, Chairman, Membership Committee and Co-Chair, Arts and Culture Committee. Reginald Gripal, Co-Vice Chair, Good Governance Committee. Ezekiel Lampa, Chairman, Finance Committee. Ray Lugtu, Chair for Ethics Book Ethics Committee. Jose Marie Pabiton, Chair for FINEX Night, FINEX Week Committee. Josefino Paloma, Vice Chair, ICT Committee. Enrique Victor Pampolina, Vice Chair, Audit Committee. Alicia San Juan, Co-Chair, Arts and Culture Committee. April Lintan, Co-Chair for Technical Sessions, FINEX Week Committee. Nikki Tang, Chair for Ways and Means, FINEX Week Committee. Jonald Vergara, Chair, Tax and Legal Committee. Jennifer Yap, Chair for Fellowship, Membership Committee. All right. So once again, may I call our dear President to induct our committee officers.
Please raise your right hand. I state your name. Having been appointed as, state your position, of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, do hereby solemnly swear that I will faithfully discharge, to the best of my ability, my duties and responsibilities in the pursuit of its goals and objectives, that I will protect and uphold its constitution and bylaws, that I will abide by its code of ethics, that I will observe the highest professional, moral, and ethical standards, and that I voluntarily impose this obligation upon myself without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God.
Thank you again, President Totti, and congratulations to the committee officers. Before we move on to the induction of our new members, we would like to acknowledge the presence of FINEX Institute past presidents who continue to support and be actively present in all our activities. So when I call your name, can you kindly stand up to be recognized? Past President George Chua. Welcome, President George. Past President Frank Isaac. There, over there. Welcome, Past President Archit Bartolome. Past President Jeng Pascual. Welcome, President Jeng. Past President Judith Lopez. Welcome, Judith. Past President Victor Lim. Vic Lim, I saw him earlier. Past President Marivic Españo. Past President Wilson Tan. Immediate past president. So again, thank you for your presence. Thank you very much. So now may I call on the chairman of the membership committee, Mr. Domingo, for the introduction and induction of our new members.
We will now induct the new members. As I call your names, kindly come forward. I also request the sponsors to please come forward and join the new members. First is Mr. Yasushi Iwata, Managing Director and Country Head, Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation, Manila Branch. Sponsor, Attorney Ebot Tan. Second is Mr. Francis Albert Hardaleza, Chief Operating Officer, BPI Capital Corporation. Sponsor, Mr. Juan Carlos Siquia. Next is Frederick Manuel, Director, Country Head, Philippines, Arch Capital Management. Sponsor, Ms. Gemma Cheng. To add solemnity to the occasion, may I request all members to stand and may I call on our President, Augusto Bengson, to administer the oath of membership. Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. I, having been appointed as of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines. Please repeat after me. Do hereby solemnly swear that I will faithfully discharge to the best of my ability my duties and responsibilities in the pursuit of its goals and objectives. That I will protect and uphold its constitution and bylaws. That I will abide by its code of ethics. That I will observe the highest professional, moral, and ethical standards. And that I voluntarily impose this obligation upon myself without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God.
May I ask everyone to kindly settle down on to the main event for this afternoon. So again, thank you, President Totti, and welcome to our new members. We look forward to working with you in FINEX and outside of FINEX. Moving on, I know we are all excited to dive right into the discussion of today's GMM theme. Before that, kindly allow me to properly introduce to you our speaker, Mr. Rafael Jose Consing Jr., the President and CEO of Maharlika Investment Corporation. Joel Consing was appointed President and CEO of Maharlika Investment Corporation on November 2023. Following 11 months of serving as the Executive Director at the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Investment and Economic Affairs, a government sector pivot following a 3-decade career in global capital markets and as a multi-awarded corporate CFO. Prior to OPA IEA, he spent 18 years in various roles in investment banking and global markets at banks such as ING, Bankers Trust, and HSBC, where the last role he served was Managing Director of the Financing Solutions Group in Asia Pacific, based in Hong Kong. He then pivoted to an award-winning 16-year career as Global Treasurer and CFO of International Container Terminal Services Inc., ICTSI. From the start of his career in Multinational Investment Bank Corporation in 1989 to now running the first ever sovereign wealth fund of the Philippines, whose mandate is to invest in high-impact, sustainable projects generate optimal return on investments, contribute to economic growth, job creation, and poverty alleviation, and to develop intergenerational socioeconomic prosperity for the country. Let us all welcome Mr. Joel Consing.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And of course, to moderate this afternoon's discussion, may I call on the ever reliable Ms. Malu Cristobal, Chairperson of NIB Capital Corp, to join Mr. Consing on stage.
Thank you. It is a pleasure having a conversation with the man of the hour. And we'd like to thank Joel for spending time, agreeing to spend time with us, knowing how everybody else will want to have a piece of the action. But yours actually is a very unenviable task, not only because of the enormity of your responsibilities, not only because of the level of expectations on the fund's performance, but really, quite candidly, also because of the controversies that have hounded the fund from its conception, its birth, and even now that the baby has started to walk, if you will pardon the analogy. We're going to have about an hour for this fireside chat. Do you know that in Uber, they had a fireside chat and they actually had a fireplace in the background just to keep the mood intimate and engaging. We're not going to get there. What I'd like to do is take the first half of that hour with my own questions and then open the floor for questions for the next half. And I hope everybody is okay with that. I know that there are a lot of developments in MIC that you would like to share with us, and we're going to dwell on some of them this afternoon. But what I'd like to do is sort of clear the air and take off by just focusing on a few of the issues and concerns that were raised by the private sector, business organizations, FINEX including, members of the academe, and even the man in the street over the past so many months. The first is really the kind of animal or the kind of creature that MIC is and its reason for being. Up until now, we still hear of people who would say that MIC has a confused identity and has confused goals. How would you respond to that?
Thank you, Malu. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. Thank you, Toti, for sending the invitation for me to be able to speak and provide awareness. It's also great to be amongst friends. So thank you. Okay. First of all, if you would look at the way the law has been written, it's very broad. You're absolutely right. In fact, I've watched, by the way, all the YouTube interviews of Stevie Cunha, for example. He referred to it as a fund that can do anything, everything, and all at the same time. So I understand where that's coming from. You have to remember, however, that the reason why it was written that way is because it's a law, and it's very long term, in its point of view, and it however left with the board of directors as how it's going to be executed over time. So if you look at the way the lawmakers have looked at sovereign wealth fund, they looked at basically the balance sheet of the nation and looked at its assets and decided to seed MIC with funds coming from the banks and coming similarly from their own dividends they're meant to receive, and use that to seed the fund, and they determined that to be sovereign wealth fund. So they looked at it from the perspective of source. Those sitting across.
Not because we have surpluses in the budget, not because
I'll get there.
we have commodity.
I'll get there. So hence, those across, when they hear the word sovereign wealth fund, and particularly those who are not practitioners, what they'll do is they'll check out Google and they'll get to Investopedia and get to any other source coming from corporate finance, I think. And they're going to read one common definition, denominator between those definitions, that there are involved excess or surplus financial assets of which this does not have. Okay. So the reality, however, if you look at the technical and textbook definition of sovereign wealth fund, there are many types, of which this animal, as we call it, is one of them. So the way we envision it basically is that for the first 5 years, it will operate as a national or strategic development fund. It will be domestic in focus, wider in scope, and collaborative in nature. And we have in fact identified the sectors into which we will be making those investments, and we can talk about it.
Okay, we can talk about later. The other concern, very serious concern, if I may add, is really the possible influence of government officials on the fund. That investment decisions may be driven by political motives, and that this could result in misappropriation of funds and potentially losses to the fund. I guess everybody is concerned about what happened to one MDB, where billions of dollars were stashed away in some private accounts, never again to be seen. And so there is really that element of trust that needs to be built, and you're coming at that point where this controversy about one MDB, which just a neighboring country, has reflected, and that it brings fear, I guess, in the hearts of a lot of the private sector. So, how do you address that?
I understand how people feel. In fact, if you look at criticisms and fear really arise out of the fact that they don't know what kind of an animal this is. Right, but now it's beginning to take shape. I think people are getting a little bit more calm because there are less criticisms that are out there. So in direct response to that point, it's really about the governance that we put in place. If you read the IRR and RA 11954, we were required, for example, to institute 2 board committees. That would be the audit committee and the risk oversight committee. Instead, when we constituted the board, we actually added 4 more. So in addition to these 2, we added corporate governance and ethics. We added nomination and remuneration, investment committee, and there's one more that I forget now. Okay, basically we have got independent directors chairing all these committees. So we've basically gotten all the best practices in the private sector, and we've applied it in MIC. And the way we're currently framing our charter in so far as the governance is concerned is we're aiming to look at the governance corporate scorecard or the Asian corporate governance scorecard, and we're going to work backwards. So that way we're following international best standards of both practices and policies. And finally, I think which is equally important is transparency. So we aim to be transparent. We aim to at the end of every calendar year, we will be producing a sustainability report, and similarly our own financial reports.
Will the financials be disclosed and made available to the public?
Absolutely.
Will the
Yes.
fund's performance be reported
Yes.
regularly to the
Yes.
public?
Yes.
Okay.
It is required by law,
Yes.
but it is also part of our intent.
I understand you're going to be appointing an external auditor. And where are you in that
So
respect?
we were discussing that. I was informed, however, recently, and we will look at it more clearly, deeper, but we were informed that there is an ethics issue. Because if we have got both the commission audit
Mhm.
and one more external party auditing us. So the auditing firm that we were bouncing this off with informed us of that situation. So
How is it done in other jurisdictions? So let's say, just looking at the region, Temasek, for example, which I understand is a sovereign development
Right.
fund.
No, others would, if they fall under GOCC rules, for example, then we've got our own, the equivalent of PFRS, but
Mhm.
it's government accounting, right? Insofar as Temasek is concerned, I think they are IFRS. But
Mhm.
again, even government accounting is actually consistent with international.
So the matter of having another external auditor, an independent, perhaps private auditor, is something that you have not quite resolved.
No, we have got, so we've got our own internal audit
Yes,
that's going
yes,
to be appointed.
right,
But whether we can obtain an external auditor on
Yes.
top of COA,
right.
I believe that the jury is still out if we can actually do that. From an ethics committee, we did approach, that was part of the intent, but I was advised that just very recently.
Okay. Now, there's another issue, and this is on the manner of funding. The concern being that our public coffers are constrained, and you did mention that earlier. And there's very little headroom for increased social development expenditures. That DBP and Land Bank have their own specific mandates that they need to pursue and finance. That this is a zero-sum game where what you give to Maharlika, you're ultimately taking away from the very sectors that these institutions are mandated to support. So how would you address that issue?
I personally think that question should be better addressed to the lawmakers. I presume that was debated in Congress. And I'm here to run the fund, not to justify why the fund was created and funded by these two banks.
It is what it is. Yes, okay, that's fine. The other, and I just want to add to that, the other, okay, this one I think you can respond to. There's a lot of people have pointed out that there are a number of government agencies, NDC, again, DBP, Land Bank, that have similar development objectives as MIC. And therefore, the concern is that MIC is actually a redundancy, that it does not provide any additionality. And if I may add to that, the other point, it's related point, that we do have ODAs. We have access to ODAs, we have access to concessionary loans, which can be tapped for infrastructure and other development projects. And again, the point being that MIC becomes unnecessary and quite expensive. So how do you?
Well, great question. I beg to disagree. So let's look at the numbers. There are about 198 flagship infrastructure projects, of which about 122, beg your pardon, about 44 are slated for PPP. The rest are being funded either via GAA or ODA. And if you look at the economics of those those projects under PPP, the government has basically bifurcated that amongst those which are not revenue generating, and therefore it must be funded with GAA. Those which are revenue generating but would require longer maturity period in terms of its liabilities and a lower cost of capital, which only an ODA can provide, or an ODA provider can fund. And you've got those projects where private sector can participate because it has got commercial returns that are commensurate to such investments. This is the area where we will be participating. Now, why do you need Maharlika? Quite for a number of things, a number of reasons. Top of which, in my opinion, is it enables, it's a catalytic investment. So our main objective is, yes, if you read the law, if you read the IRR, it's about pushing for socioeconomic development. But let's talk about from FINEX's and from Philippine Corporate Inc.'s perspective. How do we participate? We want to be able to work with private sector and being able to enable these investments, A, by putting in our own capital in, yes, and B, being able to crowd in private sector by looking for products that would hopefully be able to capture certain of these risks. An FDI, for example, looking at the Philippines, identifies certain of these risks, which they would put a price on, which might be innate to us. So what we can do is we can actually provide PRI, political risk insurance, in order for them to come in and enable such investment. So we need to be pretty creative in how we deploy the 125 billion. Okay. So in terms of our the need for Maharlika being there, apart from being a catalytic investor, I think we bring a new balance sheet and a fresh breath of breath of fresh air. For example, compared to NDC, which very well meaning, but it has got its issues. It's got its previous assets, for example, that have ended up, I would say, difficult and remedial. They got into a remedial position. So at least here we're starting off with a clean balance sheet. When we speak to foreign investors, by the way, we are speaking to foreign investors who are co-investing with us. I think we are going to be set up that way, which the likes of NDC and other agencies are not going to be set up for. The mandates are also very different. So from the perspective of DBP and Land Bank, they've got a developmental lending mandate. We don't. We have a mandate to be catalytic investors. We have a mandate to be a magnet to FDIs. We have a twin mandate to achieve commercial objectives and socio-economic objectives. So hence quite a bit different from the way the others have been set up.
I'm going to get back to this double bottom line approach, but I just want to pick up when you made reference to being catalytic. For some people, catalytic means going into fields not otherwise have been entered into, let's say by the private sector. From what we're hearing though from you is that you want to participate in the recently awarded NAIA overhauling of the NAIA airport, and I don't know if it includes operation, or getting into a few other projects where the private sector is already in. In other words, for some people, that is not catalytic enough, because to be catalytic is actually, as I said, going into missionary projects, going into projects that are otherwise not entered into by the private sector.
Okay, so quite a number of touch points there. So first is NAIA. So I did say that we were willing to look at it, and we'd be very happy to look at it too. Two things. A, it's a very important project. It is in everyone's interest in this room for NAIA project to be successful. And we therefore are willing to look at it. And if there are, I believe that we can structure some financing that would protect us from the sharing. So providing some principal, I would say, protection, but providing lending support nonetheless. Okay. The first few investments that we're going to be undertaking are going to be utility size types of investments. It'll be generating enough cash flows, and that's the base of investments that we want to undertake. So over time, intuitively, I think, I beg your pardon, by the end of the year, we aim to be able to deploy about 36 to about 40 billion pesos. That's the
Out of 125.
about 125. I envision that will happen in the energy sector. It may not sound catalytic to you, but I can tell you it's highly impactful. So when you speak of energy, for example, we're talking about upstream, midstream, and downstream. So upstream, obviously renewable. When you talk about electricity, for you, me, and everyone else in this room, there are three things that are important: price, ubiquity, and reliability. But when you talk about business, there's a fourth element, which is it renewable or not? Particularly coming from the Japanese investors, they will tell you, I spent about 11 months speaking with investors in the Bay. And we've identified about 5 pain points, one of which is electricity. And two important perspectives from the apart from those three. Apart from those three, one other aspect that is very important for them is whether the source is renewable or not. The government has got an objective of achieving a 35% renewable mix by 2030 and 50% by 2040. So if they wish to wait until 2030 and 2040 to achieve those, then they can't. But we will lose all those investments. They will bypass us and they will go to Vietnam et al. So hence, what you want to be able to do is to support and go to the X zones and provide renewable energy so that they can add that to the mix that they get from the grid to increase the contribution of renewable energy factor in their production. So that when they go to Europe, when they go to developed economies, they can say, this was created with predominantly renewable power. So that's one area that we want to be able to add value. Second would be on the midstream. So when you speak about midstream, you're talking about lines. You're speaking of transmission. So hence, if you look at the challenges, for example, at NGCP, who we would love to, well, we would look at investing in if an opportunity arises. We're not having any conversation with them at the moment. But if you just look at the requirements of the lines today, everybody's going renewable. When I was with the OPEA, out of the 7 trips of the president, of the $64.7 billion of investment pledges, 38.4% of that was in renewable energy. So there is so much capital getting into renewable. The issue is, if we do that, you're going to have issues in respect of the transmission lines because you're going to create volatility. So from NGCP's perspective, not only must they connect or spend the capex to connect the whole country, they must also create the auxiliary capacity to ensure that the lines are actually stable, coming from the volatility, coming from the renewable sources. So therefore, whatever we're able to invest in the company will be a drop in the bucket compared to what it's actually going to be required.
How welcoming do you think these target investments are to having Maharlika into the company?
In my opinion, it makes sense for critical projects to have Maharlika in for 2 reasons. Number one, because of the capital that we bring in. If I get to sit on the board, for example, then I can add value in the conversations arising from finance, capital structure, funding over time, et al. But equally important is it almost has the support of government behind it. Okay, so I think it would be welcome, but in the end, I believe it will have to be a commercial decision for them, whether or not it makes sense for them from a valuation perspective.
You've been in Maharlika for about 3 months now. I guess it feels like 3 years. And you've hit the ground running. Some would call it sprinting a marathon, meaning approaching it with breakneck speed and then keeping that speed over the long term. So it calls for speed and endurance. I'm curious to know, where are you in the staffing and organization of Maharlika? And have you actually already appointed a chief investment and operating officer?
Sure. No, so you're absolutely right. We hit the ground running. There are quite a number of verticals occurring at the same time. So let's talk about the organizational setup. So today, last Friday, I just submitted our budget to the Department of Budget and Management. The organizational, before coming here, I came from, spent a couple of hours with the GCG, or the Governance Commission for GOCCs, fine-tuning our organizational structure. Once we get that approved, then we go to the Office of the President to get that approved. And once that gets approved, then we can start hiring. So we've started interviewing folks, but we can't make an offer until we get that approved. So intuitively, I think we're probably about a month away from that. So that's one. Meanwhile, on the governance side, we've already contracted some individuals who are helping us draft the charter And once the charter is then fully drafted, we will then tender out to consultants for them to affirm and just fine tune and see. And that will then be presented to the board for approval. Okay. So once that's in, then we can start investing. So so the conversations that we're having right now is within the context of the limits that we've already discussed internally, which in turn will be incorporated into the charter.
Between now and December of this year,
Yeah.
what can we expect by way of milestones?
A couple of things. So I think by which time we would have our whole management team in place. I think we would have already announced.
For some of our members who might be interested in joining you, what are you looking for? And how do they go about conveying to you their interest to serve the country?
We will announce it. We will announce we will announce it. So the way we applied for the job, so there was a portal, so we'll do the same thing. So
Have to step forward and express the
Correct.
interest.
correct.
You should not wait to be asked. You have to step forward and convey your interest
Right.
in as best a manner as they possibly can. Okay, so it will be a beauty contest.
Okay, so looking back, by December, when you look back, we will have a very proud team. We will have a team and a company that we will be very proud of.
And your first investment may likely come in when?
I would say by the third quarter, we would have been able to announce already our first investment. It will most likely be in the energy sector.
Okay.
I'm also quite confident that it is an asset which will generate the returns and also take the boxes required for us to be able to justify.
In some of your interviews, you did mention that you want to do a roadshow to be able to attract investments into the fund. In this environment where we hear a lot of political noise, where there is a lack of speed and there are friction costs to doing business, the task cannot be easy. So how are you going to convince foreign investors to invest in Maharlika? What's your pitch?
Sure. I don't have to wait for the roadshow. I'm already having those conversations this early. So we've identified a pipeline at the moment that is geared towards energy in terms of timing of when the announcements are going to be making. So we've not announced. We have determined our risk limits. Our risk limits are roughly about 15% maximum per sector. Correct. It's roughly about 15 to 20% of fund. That said, that's going to be undertaken over a period of 3 years because as you deploy, obviously those percentages will not be as you want it to be. So meanwhile, knowing already how much commitments we're going to be doing on the energy in the energy sector or commitment to the energy sector, we've already started speaking to funds wherein we are putting up an LP that's energy focused. So
Or you will be attracting investors into sectors that you will be pursuing.
correct. So what we're doing is you see the reality is
It's thematic in
Yes.
effect of participation.
see given the investment requirements of the country, 125 billion is not enough. But at the same time, we also don't want to go back to government to do a capital call. So you have to be able to leverage the 125 billion. There are 3 ways to leverage that. A is by taking real leverage, i.e. borrowing, increasing your AUM and investing that AUM. We're allowed to do that.
You're not gonna do that,
No, not yet.
not now,
No, not
or not ever.
Temasek does that, but
Yes.
the first time they did that was about 11 years ago, roughly about 25 years after they were created. So it took a bit of time.
So it's just it's a matter of timing that you're not
Correct.
gonna borrow for now, but it's not closing the door to
Correct.
possibly
Once
going
you
to
get
the
cash
market. at
flow,
some
once you
future.
can justify it, once you become creditworthy, then yes. So therefore, the way to expand that is through off-balance sheet means, i.e. getting third-party funding to basically create limited partnerships, which we will then manage and deploy. And we'll get paid fees for that. So we were thinking, at the moment, the discussions that we're having with them is a potential 2%.
How's their exit?
well, it's going to be part of the of the rules of the fund that we're going to be creating. But just hear me out. So the way, therefore, to invest our own limit, let's say that 15% of 125 billion is about 18.75 billion. So what we'll do is that 18.75 billion will be our contribution to the fund. So that way we can actually spend beyond what we've set out for, beyond the capital that we have available, but also limiting our own exposure to the risk limits that we've decided.
So effectively, you're selling the project and not so much the
Projects, we've got a
project.
Yeah.
I will stop for now and take questions from the floor. There's a microphone in the middle. Please raise your hand and wait for me to acknowledge you. And I see a hand. Yes, Edith. How can I not call on you? You were the first to raise your hand.
Hello, this is my question. We remember that during the time of President Marcos Sr. and the late Bobby Ongpin, they created the NDC to bring the country's industrialization in full force. And fast forward, BBM and Secretary Fred Pascual reenacted or resurrected that NDC. And as Joel mentioned, NDC is different from Maharlika Investment Fund because it's developmental, except that it has a lot of dead assets. But right now, for me, I don't see anything new with NDC. And as said, Maharlika Fund has the fresh funds. NDC is stuck with the dead assets. Why don't you merge the two together and let Joel handle it?
No. Actually, NTC is actually doing good stuff now. They are definitely doing excellent stuff. They're supporting startups. They're entering into new technologies, which Maharlika is not ready to undertake. We want to enter into utility scale investments. In their case, they're doing startup type of investments, so very different mandate.
So the answer is no, Joel is not espousing a merger.
He doesn't like,
NDC and
maybe Joel doesn't like the dead assets. And I hope the new NDC projects will not become dead assets as well.
Okay, any more questions? Yes.
Thank you, ma'am, for those very enlightening questions. And this is but a suggestion to our guest speaker. Thank you for your answers, sir. I'm Dan Agustin of Institute of Corporate Directors and Corporate Finance of Ateneo. May I suggest, sir, and may I get your comments? Now, on the question of why Maharlika, I think I suggest that we have to relate it to the medium-term fiscal plan of the government, including the PDP or the Philippine Development Plan, as well as the 8-point agenda of the Marcos administration. I will not go into that. And to the question of FDI, now, when the economic managers of the country justified before the Senate and Congress for the creation of Maharlika, they cited the Indonesian model. When I studied the Indonesian model, they were operating on scarcity, not on surplus. And the focus is on FDI, the foreign direct investments. And the key strategy of the Indonesian model, in which I suggest is that they got a good external finance firm, and I'm not advertising this firm. It is the PwC, or probably it's because of their network, and they were successful in getting foreign investment in Indonesia. So that's my suggestion, sir. And what's your reaction, please? Thank you very much.
Certainly open to it. Again, we're open to all ideas. So yes, Okay, so I actually don't understand the question, but there are two things. So number one, in Indonesia is in fact the closest comparable to what we have right now. We're aiming to crowd in FDIs, but also let's not forget domestic capital. It's extremely important, really, for us to be able to mobilize domestic savings. And second is making use of consultants to raise money. Absolutely, that's definitely part of what we aim to do.
And another, sir, thank you for considering power like what happened in the Western Visayas and NAIA. And in the example of Kazakhstan, and as far as risk management is concerned, in the Kazakhstan case, there was critical in infrastructure would be the engineering aspect. And what's good in the Kazakhstan case is that they opened and letter of credit whereby banks would guarantee in case of the failure of the engineering. I may suggest also that you open a letter of credit so that funds will be protected in case the engineering aspect would be a problem. Thank you very
No,
much.
thank you for that. No, we won't be doing that.
Thank
We
you.
will
And-
not be doing such guarantees. Yeah, we won't be doing.
Any more questions from the floor? Yes.
Good afternoon. So I wanted to ask, you mentioned before in the news articles that one of the focus areas for the fund was agriculture.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how far off in the horizon are you looking at before you start investing in actually investing in agriculture? Because you said third quarter would be energy products, and obviously how far off are we? And are there any dependencies before you go into agriculture? Because I know.
Well,
Yeah.
great question. Thank you for that. In fact, very big dependencies. So originally, when we were looking at agriculture, when I was in UPEA, one of the issues that we really looked at was investors were looking for contiguous land in which they can locate basically their facilities, like create export zones. However, the problem was consolidating land. So when I moved into Maharlika, I said, well, we'll start looking at government lands, idle government lands, and converting them into a cluster of industrial ecozones. And at the perimeter, you would have then agriculture and forestry facilities. So we're now having conversations with 3 agencies. So that'll take a bit of time because that's G to G, right? So we can only move as fast as they can. But those conversations are ongoing. I can't promise a timetable because they can't promise me a timetable. But those conversations are ongoing.
Thank you.
I want to have a follow-up question there. You
Yeah.
did, you have a 3-year term.
Yeah.
And a lot of your projects will run longer than 3 years. And we know how the government works. You mentioned trying to tap idle government assets, and we know how long that can take. You have any plan, any strategy how to speed up government approvals and the way government does business?
Yeah, no. So what I've described in many other interviews are basically I laid out our vision. Right. So the vision are the sectors where we're going to be investing, and we've identified 6 of them. We've also identified the products where we're investing, i.e. hybrid capital and equity. At the same time, we're putting the governance in place.
Yes.
Within that context, we are now aiming for the low-hanging fruits. So the low-hanging fruits, therefore, are those which we'll be announcing soon. We're looking at a low-hanging fruit in respect of mining, a low-hanging fruit in respect of agriculture. So those will happen, except that, again, the timing of this pipeline, I believe that energy will happen first. Then others will follow suit. But I believe really that we're close to energy compared to everywhere else.
Any more questions from the floor? Yes, Jen.
Hi, good afternoon, Joel. You're a FINEX member, and a lot of the stakeholders of the Maharlika Investment Corporation are, represented here in FINEX. So I just wanted to, find out what your thoughts are in terms of how you see the private sector or organizations like FINEX supporting the objectives of the Maharlika Investment Corporation.
Great question. Thanks for that. I think helping us create awareness is first and foremost. Second is bring us projects. Because what we really want to be able to, working with the private sector is absolutely key for us. So there might be investments wherein we might be taking a great majority or a substantial majority of a company, but that's not because we aim to control it over time, but rather it's because it's required at the onset of the investment, and over time we will then monetize it to those who can actually run it much better than we can. So hence, partnering up with the private sector is a key critical component of our strategy. So thank you for asking that question. It's a really important partnership for us.
Joel, I want to go back to the double bottom line, where you're looking at commercial returns
Yes.
alongside social and economic returns. I guess it's a reality that a lot of development projects do not yield attractive returns, especially over the short term. So which has primacy between the two? They don't always run along the same pace. And so between one and the other, which has primacy?
Oh, commercial returns first before socioeconomic development goals. And again, this is about we're
What
investing.
sort of return are you looking at?
Well, it has to be a risk-adjusted spread.
Any ballpark figure
I
that
can't talk about that.
you cannot know
I
until,
can't talk about that.
until later? Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So aiming for a risk-free spread, pardon me, a spread about risk-free rate. So it's going to be a risk-adjusted return. Also thinking, I'm also quite conscious of the fact that we must provide enough spread so that when you do a swap, particularly for those investors coming in, that they have enough spread for them to actually make a gain following the even after they pay the currency swap. But just going back to your question earlier, commercial returns first and foremost, socioeconomic development goals a close second, but you have to remember we are investing borrowed money. Right? Yes, it's coming from equity, from the accounts coming from Land Bank and DBP, and dividends really received by the government, but it is first and foremost debt, because these dividends, if it were not going to go to Maharlika, then it would have been spent either on social services or to repay debt. So I fully understand. So we therefore are going to be aiming for a minimum cost of money that we will be identifying and a spread to ensure that whatever returns that we're generating would not only cover cost of capital, but also the cost of lost opportunity today, which is inflation. So so we're very conscious about those returns.
So no missionary projects, no projects where the return is kind of up.
No, just hear me out. So when we look at projects, so let me give you an idea. Let me give you two examples. One of the projects that we want to do is we aim to roll out telecoms towers in the rural areas. Today, incumbent telecoms companies won't do it on their own because it's going to be their capex. So here, it'll be our capex. We'll work with tower companies. We'll create towers that can accommodate both satellite and telecoms equipment, so that they can actually stay, meaning the incumbent telecoms companies can then go and lease space in those telecom towers to reduce their capex, right? So we're basically helping them convert their capex into OPEX and bring in their equipment and start serving the area. It'll help 4 areas: agriculture, educational sector. It'll help the rural entrepreneurs open up new markets, hopefully nationally and internationally. And fourth, it'll open up potentials for telehealthcare. So hopefully we can create a new startup environment as we move along. And those will have excellent returns. So the reality is that just because you have got socioeconomic development goals being achieved, that commercial returns are not being met. In fact, many of these actually have latent demand, except that it's not being served because it does not exist. So let me give you another example. Infrastructure, physical connectivity. Why spend again? There's so much highways already built that's been built. If you calculate the kilometer per capita of the Philippines for 1 million people compared to our neighbors, we're number 11 out of 12. Thailand has got about 9,800 kilometers for 1 million people. And that's how they can accommodate 11.5 million, pardon me, close to 20 million tourists because of a single touch point arriving into Thailand and being able to deliver that tourist by road through 9,800 kilometers ratio per 1 million people. Vietnam comes next. Vietnam is about 5,800 kilometers per 1 million people, close to about 7.8 million tourists. Indonesia, 4,000. We're about 1,845. There's so much capacity that can be created just by building that connectivity. It'll help out agriculture. You'll generate reduce logistics costs. And equally important is it'll help out with tourist area. So
A lot of multiplier effect.
the multiplier effect is actually quite immense and it's highly profitable.
I just want to go back to your projects. You did mention what, 4 or 6 sectors that you want to cover. Within those sectors will be a whole slew of potential investments. How do you do your prioritization? How do you determine which ones to get into first and then push back the others for a later?
The reality is like the way you would in a corporate setting. So which would give you the best return first and foremost, and second is which would give you the combination of meeting both objectives or the twin mandates of commercial.
So we still go back to commercial return together
Yes.
with what it brings by way of social and
So one thing that we'll be instilling as part of our framework is rigor.
yes.
Right? And that rigor and that process is really about ensuring that whoever sits as CEO in the future will be following the same vision, following the same process. So the president has to hire star CEOs, star CIOs.
Or reappoint you for another 3 years. Are there any more questions? Yes, Marivic and then Franz.
Hi, Joel. I'm just wondering, right now, government funds projects through the budget, through overseas assistance, and then you have PPPs. And then now comes Maharlika. So how do we decide the funding or the channel through which all of this is going to happen? Because when you were talking about, for instance, some roads project or let's say energy, there are foreign investors coming in, partnering with private sector. So either they undertake the project on their own, or they propose the project with the government through a PPP program. And the current administration said that they're open to PPPs. So how do you balance it, and how do we rationalize what goes into what?
Sure, no, thanks for that question. And again, it goes back to my point earlier. We're here to crowd in investors, or we're not out there to crowd out investors. So when there are projects we're in, so how are we getting ourselves into the PPP market? So at the moment, you've got the IRR that's being written. What we have presented ourselves, insofar as the IRR is concerned, is to allow us to do 2 things. A, provide stapled capital to these projects, and at the option of the project sponsor to take. So it's not going to be forced upon them. So we can provide hybrid capital or equity financing, stable once they.
Will the government lean on them to induce them to take you?
No, not necessarily. It's something which that to decide. So that's the first. So staple capital, I mentioned that. A second is for us to become a co-grantor. So what does that mean? That means that if, for example, there's a PPP project out there that is not moving, we can actually work with the agency and take it out of the PPP process and we can then fund the initial requirements. And when we get a partner, then we ourselves will tender it out alongside the agency. So by so doing, we then get to accelerate the projects themselves. So we need to really be creative in how we can add value to the private sector, and not crowd them out. Now, insofar as what is the process in terms of the path that the government takes, whether they're going to go for ODA, GAA, or PPP, is really a function of the return on the projects. So once they deem that the returns of these projects it'll only make sense if it's funded by an ODA, then they will go for an ODA because it makes more sense for them. If a project does not have any economic return, all socio-economic, then most likely it'll be funded with GAA. But if there is a commercial benefit to it for private sector to be involved, then they will tender out the PPP, and we will present ourselves to be a provider of capital for that PPP project.
Franz.
Thank you, Joel. How do you see the fund with respect to its investments? Because over the long term, you can see yourself like a Temasek will be there for many, many years as a shareholder. Or do you actually see the fund as a traditional fund with an exit horizon? If so, what is that horizon? Will it be 5, 7, 10 years? And what are the returns and the hurdles? And what will be the manner of exit?
Sure. Thanks. So from the perspective of the original capital providers of MIC, i.e. ROP, Land Bank, and DPP, the only way by which they can, well, not exit, is to generate value from this is via dividends and through intrinsic value. That's the reality. When we talk about exit, we are speaking of the investments themselves, right? So the LPs will demand that. The LPs most likely would have a term of about 10 years, which forces us then to either buy out partners in the LP or exit the investment altogether. So we present ourselves as slightly more patient compared to the typical private equity investors, but we are impatient when it comes to earnings. Okay. So patience in terms of longevity, of ability to stay, but impatient
In getting things done.
value
Okay.
creation.
Right. Any more questions? Yes.
Hello, good morning. So I'm Alros. My question is, would there be investments or projects directed to real estate, specifically in affordable housing? So for example, we have like 6.5 million housing backlogs, and like almost 25% of the population ages 15 to 25 are going in the workforce in the next 5 to 7 years, and would like to have their own housing, right? Would there be like investment directed to these?
No, we did not identify housing as one of our focus. We wanted to get into utilities first, like utility scale investments.
Right.
So real estate, whilst it is allowed under MIC rules, it's not one of those that we have actually focused on.
Gotcha.
We're not close to it,
Not yet.
but it's at the moment, it's not one of the 6.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mike G, how much time do we have? 15 more minutes. Okay. Okay, while you're thinking of your questions, let me go back to governance. Governance is particularly tricky, right? Especially where the government is concerned. The concern of some is that too much government intervention could tie your hands and could cause unnecessary delays. Too little, however, could compromise the fund's integrity and prove the naysayers right. So it is a balancing act. So how do you propose to run the fund, run MIC optimally so that you are able to adhere to good governance practices, but at the same time run it in the most efficient manner possible?
Actually, so see no problem. I actually see no conflict, as a matter of fact. we recognize what we are. We are a GOCC, and we therefore have to follow GOCC rules. We are a government entity, and we therefore follow government procurement rules. There are certain exemptions that are allowed within RA 11954. The reality, however, is that we are a government entity. So there is no such thing as too little or too much. We are a government. Okay. Now, that said, where we aim to be nimble is in the structuring of our investments. So in the structuring of our investments, for example, we want to ensure that when we undertake JVs, we do it in a way wherein we don't end up making this such subsidiary a GOCC. Because once you do that, then they will be hampered by GOCC rules. And you already have your JVs already, JV partners is already part of it. So they get sucked into the government bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Right. So hence we don't therefore envision taking a majority of these assets.
So you will always come in a minority position so that the entity does not become a government.
Okay, so when we talk about minority and majority, we're talking about let's bifurcate that
Yes.
into voting and economic.
Okay.
Okay,
Mm.
so we can actually enter into a transaction wherein we can take a lower voting right, but higher
Economic
economic
interest.
interest, right? So
Okay.
again, we
Yeah.
can really be creative.
What are your must-haves? Board seat, what
Board
other?
seat,
Yes.
absolutely. Where we have not a significant minority, but just let's say 20%, 10 to 20%, we want to have a seat in the audit committee, right? So in the most critical committees, we want a seat in the table. It's really important.
Nomination Compensation Committee?
Correct, yeah. So those where we deem to be, which we deem to be critical, we want to see them.
And the people that you will put in there, are there certain limitations about how far you can look? I mean, for example, we have a lot of qualified FINEX members. Will
Yeah.
you be tapping from the private sector or they must come from government agencies or
We can actually
GOCCs?
tap ICD, for example. We can certainly tap into our own pool in Maharlika. So
Yeah.
definitely quite open.
So there is all the potential for FINEX members to participate
Yes.
as director.
If I may also,
Yes.
just looking at the governance, so we've got 9 board seats. Only 4 are government. 3 are ex officio plus myself. 5 are private sector, except that 1 has been filled. So this is really a private sector governance.
Are you keeping that slot for somebody?
No, we're just looking for the right background. We've seen a plethora of CVs.
What are you looking for?
We're looking for someone with, I would say, private equity experience, for example. That's
Mm.
what we lack in the board.
Okay,
We
yes.
all have startup experience. We all have governance experience. But I think it would be good to have someone with real private equity, deep private equity experience. So we're saving that for that role. Alternatively, we could also want to get someone with developmental economics background. So we're open to that as well.
Okay, last 2 questions. I'll get 1 question from the floor. Okay, let me ask. I'll claim the last 2 questions. Getting into MIC or Maharlika, what were your positive expectations that are being realized? And the flip side of it would
I haven't seen any of my worst fears just yet, so I'm not worried about that. So when I first heard about Maharlika during the congressional debates, and when I first heard about it, I said I want to run that company. So hence I started thinking about
what did you see about Maharlika that you wanted to be there?
the opportunity to become impactful. So I want to be impactful in a way where I can actually touch the lives of many Filipinos. It's time for me to give back. The country has been very good to us, so it's really time for us to give back. Me to give back. I would say it's coming to fruition. I'm able to actually influence the shape of this animal that we call called Maharlika. And I truly believe that in 5 years, looking back, this is a company that you will be very proud of.
What is it that you once said about Maharlika by the time you wrap up your involvement in it?
That we were true to our and very loyal to our objective, which is achieving commercial returns and similarly impacting social economic development needs of the country. I want to be measured by the returns that we have achieved over a period of 5 years. I want to be measured by,
Why are you talking 5 years?
oh, pardon me, 3 years. Sorry, 3 years.
Lit.
We also want to be, I also want to be able to be judged by the number of jobs that we generate, number of investments we've actually made. So those are the criteria by which I want to be judged 3 years from now.
Can you give Joel a round of applause, please? Thank you very much.
I would like to call on our President, President Totti, to award and to provide our token of appreciation to Joel.
Yes, yes, indeed. I love it. Thank you. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. 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 Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for attending the second GMM of the year. And this meeting is adjourned.
Good afternoon. So all Phoenix Week committee members, please proceed to table number 14 for our scheduled meeting. Once again, for all Phoenix Week committee members, please proceed to table number 14 for our scheduled meeting. Thank you.